Born on March 21, 1806, in the small Zapotec village of San Pablo Guelatao in the rugged mountains of Oaxaca, Benito Juarez came into the world as a full-blooded indigenous boy in a Mexico still deeply rooted in colonial hierarchies, just a few years before the Mexican War of Independence would erupt. Orphaned at the age of 3 and raised by his uncle, Juarez spoke only Zapotec until his adolescence, tending sheep in the fields while nurturing an insatiable thirst for learning and justice. At age 12, driven by dreams of education and social mobility, he walked to the city of Oaxaca with nothing but ambition in his heart. Taken in by a kind-hearted Franciscan layman, Antonio Salanueva, who helped enroll him in seminary school, Juarez soon shifted his path from theology to law, graduating from the Instituto de Ciencias y Artes de Oaxaca in 1834. His deep belief in rationalism, secular governance, and indigenous equality shaped his legal career, and as he rose through the ranks of local politics, first as a city councilman, then a judge, and eventually governor of Oaxaca, he championed liberal reforms and constitutional law. As a political figure of rare honesty and resolve, Juarez found himself increasingly at odds with the traditionalist, clerical, and military elite who dominated Mexican society. In the wake of political turbulence following the U.S.-Mexican War, Juarez was exiled to New Orleans in 1853 after Antonio López de Santa Anna returned to power as dictator. There, in the sweltering quarters of exile, he cleaned cigar molds for meager pay while continuing to draft constitutional ideas with fellow liberal exiles. When Santa Anna was overthrown in 1855, Juarez returned to Mexico and became a key architect of the reform laws, groundbreaking legislation that dismantled church privileges, nationalized ecclesiastical property, and promoted civil marriage and secular education. Rising to national prominence, he served as Minister of Justice and then Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. In 1858, when President Ignacio Comonfort was overthrown in a conservative coup, Juarez, constitutionally next in line, assumed the presidency, beginning the tumultuous war of the reform between liberals and conservatives. Juarez led a peripatetic government in exile for years, constantly fleeing as conservative forces captured key cities, but he remained steadfast in his belief that only a constitutional republic could save Mexico from the cyclical tyranny of caudillos and clerical influence. With liberal forces victorious by 1861, he resumed the presidency officially, but his greatest challenge was still ahead: the French intervention. In 1862, exploiting Mexico's debt default and encouraged by Mexican conservatives, Napoleon III of France sent troops to install Archduke Maximilian of Habsburg as emperor. Juarez refused to recognize the foreign-imposed monarchy and took to the road again, leading the Republican resistance from the hinterlands of northern Mexico for 5 grueling years. He garnered international support, particularly from the United States, which under President Lincoln opposed European intervention, and organized guerrilla warfare that slowly eroded imperial control. When the French withdrew in 1867 and Maximilian was captured and executed, Juarez returned to Mexico City a hero and restorer of the Republic. His return marked not just a military victory, but the triumph of constitutionalism and nationalism against foreign imposition and internal reaction. Despite criticism for increasingly centralizing power and suppressing dissent, Juarez remained committed to his reformist ideals, emphasizing infrastructure, public education, and the rule of law. He faced opposition from radical liberals who felt he was not progressive enough, and from conservatives who viewed him as the destroyer of tradition, yet he stood as a symbol of Mexico's republican resolve and indigenous resilience. His 1871 re-election to a 5th term sparked controversy and rebellion, notably from Porfirio Díaz, his former ally, whose Plan de la Noria denounced Juarez's extended stay in power. But Juarez, convinced that continuity was essential for stability, pressed on with his reforms even as he began to physically decline. On July 18, 1872, he died suddenly of a heart attack while working late into the night in the National Palace, leaving behind a nation more modern, more secular, and more just than the one he had inherited. His funeral drew multitudes of mourners, and his legacy as Benemerito de las Americas was cemented not only in Mexico but across Latin America, where his humble origins, legal brilliance, and indomitable defense of sovereignty and constitutionalism became an inspiration to Republicans everywhere. Though his journey began in silence, as a Zapotec boy unknown to history, Benito Juarez died as a towering figure, a statesman who believed that respect for the rights of others is peace, and who showed that democracy in Mexico could grow even in the harshest of soils.